going to talk about 5 things that I'm affected by having autism that are probably the most impactful and influential elements of autism on my life. And that's isolation, communication, noise distraction, emotion, and memory. Now, most of these can be quite negative, some of them positive. Isolation is probably the number one issue that people with any neurodiverse condition, but especially autism, experience. Isolation happens because, for the most part, we find it very difficult to make and keep friends. That's perhaps society's problem. Perhaps, it's something that society can work on to be more accepting to people with autism. Perhaps it's something that will never change, I don't know, but it is certainly something which I experience. Isolation also happens because what you tend to find when you have a condition which is neurodiverse is that it's very difficult to find people who understand you and who experience the same sort of things that you experience and want to engage in the same kind of conversations that you want to engage. One of my closest friends is my 9-year-old daughter, quite simply because I can have a conversation with her that flows better and is more entertaining and more engaging than a conversation with most other adults that I know, quite simply because our brains are so well connected and so interchangeable in our thoughts and ideas and our likes. I can show Daisy a video of something which I love and find incredibly entertaining, which other people will find horrendously boring, and she'll watch it with me and she'll love it with me. And that's a great thing, in terms of that's a very positive thing. To have that kind of relationship with your children is very unique. I have a very unique relationship with Daisy and I love it. There's no negatives there whatsoever, but it can be quite draining. We talked in the last video about friendships, and I go into quite a bit more detail about that in that video. Following on from that is communication. Communication is very difficult when you have autism, and one of the main reasons for that is that we don't really understand subtlety. We have to be told things in very clear and uncertain terms, and that's not really how the world works. Generally speaking, the world likes to talk in metaphors and similes and very subtle language. Especially British language is very subtle because we're very sarcastic. I can do sarcasm, I can do sarcastic humour, but sometimes I don't get it. I'm going to do another video about how we don't talk about levels of autism anymore, how there's, we've kind of got rid of Asperger's and low functioning and high functioning. But you have to accept that there is a mild autism and a severe autism. And for some people who have severe autism, they don't get any kind of metaphors at all. So if somebody said to them, for instance, it's raining cats and dogs outside, they would be looking for cats and dogs going, where's the cats and dogs? I can understand that that's a metaphor and it's an expression and it's a saying, and I can usually manage okay with stuff like that. But there are a lot of other subtle language methods that people use, that neurotypical people use, that wash over my head, and that can be very, very distressing sometimes. Noise distraction, this is the biggest one for me. Have you ever had a fly in a room and you're aware of it, but for the most part you can ignore it? When you have ASD, you cannot ignore that fly. It's impossible. It is so loud. I want you to imagine that a fly's decibel level, okay, to somebody who's neurotypical is around about 30 decibels, 25, 30 decibels. It's really quiet. It's a faint hum. Imagine it like an air conditioner or a fan or a humming fridge. It's really low down on the spectrum of volume. To somebody who has ASD, their brain does not translate that low volume into a low input. It translates it into a very high volume input. And that fly will be the noisiest thing in the room, and it will overpower, outperform everything else in the room, and it will make it almost impossible for you to focus in on what you're supposed to be focusing in on. If I go to somebody's house and they have the TV turned on loud, that's going to put me into a meltdown state. It really is. I find that incredibly distressing and almost impossible to talk to people if they have the TV on. I used to work in sales and I used to visit people's houses, and Most people are kind of quite good, and I think it's respectful. I think when a stranger walks into your house, to turn the TV off or at least turn the volume off is respectful. A lot of people aren't, and they will leave the TV on at full volume, and I used to find that I was exhausted. By the end of a sales conversation with somebody, I was absolutely exhausted if they'd had the TV on. So that's another difficulty that we face. Emotion. This is one that has two sides. It's a bittersweet element of autism. The good side of this is that if somebody comes to me with a problem, I will properly feel the emotions with them. I will cry with them. I will feel every inch of their pain, their sadness, their sorrow, their anger, their anxiety. I can really, really, really key into somebody who's feeling bad, and it doesn't matter what the problem is, whether it's something that I've never faced before, I'll still be able to key into their emotions. Where this becomes difficult is that sometimes you don't want that, or other people sometimes don't want that. And where it also becomes difficult is that you become so in touch and so in tune with emotions that it exhausts you, and you start looking for reasons, especially in terms of the intrusive thoughts and the paranoia. You start looking for reasons that people are feeling the way you feel. And in these intrusive and paranoid thoughts, you become convinced that it's your fault. And what you have to work really, really hard on, and this is almost impossible, but you try your best as somebody who has autism, is to try and detach from emotions sometimes, to try and say, look, that person might be just having a bad day. That person might have had a row with their other half. That person might be going through some really stressful stuff at home. They don't want to talk about it. It's not your fault. I spend so much time believing that anybody's mood, anybody's emotion is my fault and is somehow something I've done. And I know a lot of people with autism can relate to this. So that has a positive and a negative. And lastly, memory. I have got an incredible long-term memory, to the point that if you ask me what the registration plate of my dad's car was in 1989, what car it was, I will be able to ream it off. The car, the colour, the registration plate, what it looked like inside, any kind of details about it. And that's because when you have autism and you have special interests, you focus 100% of your brain power into these special interests. You hyper-focus. And when you hyper-focus, your brain realizes that this is something that's super important, so it commits it to memory. Also, there are studies done that show that ASD sufferers do have a particular skill in the memory field, that it's something which they are blessed with. There's often the stereotypical autism Rain Man connection, that can, conjure up any date, if any day of the week. If you give them a date, they can say the 17th of October, 1976 was a Thursday. There's that kind of memory, and that's relatively rare. That's not something which every person who has autism is equipped with, but certainly memory is something which is beneficial. Also, it's not, because you remember sad things that you don't necessarily want to remember. Like, I can remember upsetting person X 17 years ago and where I was and what I said wrong, and you live this kind of constant, I wish I hadn't said that. Imagine thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, but it was 24 years ago. That's kind of what the memory element of autism is like sometimes. So a blessing and a curse. Is there anything else that you can think of? Any other autistic traits that you can think of? Tell me down in the comments and we'll have a discussion about it. Thanks again for watching. I really, really appreciate it. This is a new channel for me, and this is a new opportunity to be able to discuss things and hopefully help people and spread awareness about autism, and the fact that, most people who have ASD are normal people. I don't like that word normal, because what's normal? But, not everybody with ASD has a severe disability. You might have met 5 or 6 people who have autism today and you didn't realize, because it is a very subtle underlying condition. So I'd like to spread awareness about that as well. If you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee, you can do so on the Patreon. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. As I always say, these videos will never be monetized. I will never run adverts on them, because I want these videos to be free and easy to watch for those that don't want to pay. And that's great. If you're not able to spare a couple of quid for a cup of coffee and you just want to get the content, then I will be the happiest person alive. But engage with me, because there's nothing more soul destroying than making these videos and not getting feedback in the comments because I don't know you're watching. Stats don't really convince me, you know, so have a chat with me in the comments and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And if you have any requests for a video, let me know as well. Take care. Bye.